Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Now, about last year, this time, I had an interview with an interesting gentleman who was trying to tell me about Bitcoin. And it was a bit of a convoluted conversation. I had no idea really what it was. I can't admit that I am too much knowing what it is still. And a number of people got in touch and said that he had got it all wrong. And I thought, oh dear, I'm going to shelve this subject until perhaps when I actually ought to be taking more attention to it. And as we've been hearing in the news more and more about CBDCs and how dangerous they will be and how programmed money can control our lives and in fact limit us from having certain things, clearly finding an answer to where we're going to go, and what with the financial collapse around the corner, Bitcoin has raised its head again, and I thought I better get some proper advice. So I am going to be talking to the author of The Price of Tomorrow, Jeff Booth, who is, I'm going to say, an expert. He may tell me something different on Bitcoin, and he joins me from Canada. And hello to you, Jeff.
Hey, Richard. Thanks for having me on.
It's very, very kind of you to come and help me out and my audience, because I think a lot of my audience, some of them will obviously know it, and some people have been pushing me in this direction. But to the general public, I think it's something they've heard of possibly, but not really engaged with. And I'm hoping that you can help us through what appears to be quite alien in some ways.
Yeah, happy to do my best on that. And so I would say first off, and this is the one of the things I explored in my book. The natural state of a free market is deflation.
Right.
But say that a whole bunch of times, right? The natural state of a market is deflation, and why? Because we try to solve problems, and when we solve problems, people use the service, and they only use the service or product if it delivers more value than what was there before.
Right.
So,
That makes
so,
sense.
so if we're solving problems and delivering more value, and it only works if people use that, then the natural state of a free market must be deflationary. And then from there, prices fall to the marginal cost of production. And so you ask yourself, what is the marginal cost of production of this Zoom we're on? Zero. That's why it costs zero. And
Right.
and and
Okay.
and and and, and now this can touch millions of people. This one conversation could touch millions of people all over the world, where it couldn't 20 years ago. We had to
That's
fly it, and so there are a whole bunch more cost embedded into the system. And this is just one example. Look at your phone and all the apps on your phone, and then ask yourself, what's the marginal cost of production of a line of code creating other lines of code where AI is taking us? And then ask yourself, what about the marginal cost of production, a line of code creating other lines of code connected to a robot that's going to do physical labor? And you can see the natural state of a free market is exponentially deflationary. It gets better and better and better. And in that world, what that means, the rate of deflation today, you can't measure a counterfactual. So, but I would suspect we didn't live in the financial system we live in. The natural state of a market would be today at about -5% deflation. And so, so what, and that would be getting better and better through time, or more and more, um, um, say, productivity flowing to you in the form of lower prices every year, exponentially forever. That's what the world should look like.
mm,
And in that world, you would have you would have everyone in the world getting richer at a faster rate as the productivity flowed to society. There is no monopoly in a free market. There can't be, because anything that raises prices too high, and as jobs follow the market, all the entrepreneurs swarm to take advantage of that, and they bring prices down of the highest margin items. So it constantly moves to you in productivity. In the world we live in, it's a mirror image of that.
mm.
Because when I wrote the book, there was $250 trillion of global debt. 250 trillion.
I know.
But,
Figure
but
you can't imagine.
you can't imagine. But 185 trillion of the 250 had come in the preceding 20 years. and it had only increased GDP, global GDP, by 46 trillion. So essentially, one in $4, an extra $4 to $1 of debt for GDP. And why was that happening? And why did I project that it would be exponential still? And debt would today, is it's only 4 years later from my writing my book, is now about $400 trillion of global debt. So why
Presumably,
is
this would never ever get paid back, would it? It would just
so
continue.
yeah, so now go into that a little deeper. So if you paid back that debt globally at $1 per second, the 400 trillion, it would take 12,873,000 years to pay back.
Bloody hell.
Okay, so now you can start to understand the problem we're in, right?
Yeah.
And you have to understand the problem you're in before you can understand the solution. Like, what could build Bitcoin do? What does that mean?
Mm.
What does that, because so the problem you're in is you're in this system, and we are all measuring a system that must, to stay solvent, raise prices.
Right.
And the faster technology moves one way, the faster it has to steal money the other way. So you're not measuring from zero inflation, you're measuring from -5 to whatever the inflation rate is. And there is no democratic process to be able to vote for inflation or the capture of money.
Right.
So that means democracies have to break in that model, because it's just theft.
Mm.
What it means is every single person in the world today is has financial repression at a massive rate that is getting worse and worse, and that has to centralize, and it has to make big monopoly companies and big media and WEF and big government bigger and bigger and bigger, as they're now not in service to you, they're stealing from you.
Right. So,
um and this is really
yeah.
important, and I'd love to, but really, so most people in the world are measuring that system from the system that's creating all the pain, and yelling at different people within that system, making it stronger.
Right. Okay. So to get out of this, which presumably everybody watching will be going, okay, well, we can't carry on with this because it's so detrimental to our lives, and nobody wants to be in that much debt, and it seems clear that this will never get paid back, and we just pass it on to the next generation, and so on until one global company seems to own everything, as does seem to be the prediction that or some of these globalists want. Then it's got to crash, hasn't it? And we've got to sort of
So this can go on for a lot longer, and it goes on because of our behaviors. Everyone, including you, and this is hard to say to people, but everything you're doing in the existing system is making it stronger. And
right.
you wouldn't vote for somebody to allow that system to collapse, right? Because if you allowed deflation from a credit-based system that's only credit, the whole 400 trillion gets reset. It just counterparty risk, everything fails. House prices, they go almost to zero, because all banks fail, the entire system collapses. So there's no way any government would allow that to happen, because there'd be riots on the street. So what typically governments do in this is you create an enemy inside your country, the other side. You capture more power, you capture more control, and then to stay elected, because it's based on theft, and to stay elected, you have to create an enemy outside your borders. And then that's where the world goes to war. And this resets over and over throughout history. And the same thing resets because we could never live. Then here's with gold, with other things, because they're centralized, because they have to be centralized, and you can't communicate at the speed of light on gold. It has to be centralized. They're subject to abuse. They get
Right.
revalued, right? They get revalued. Rules change, and why? If you just a really simple reason throughout history, and why is because if you can convince society that 2% or 1% inflation is great when the market should be deflationary, then you get to steal from everybody, all productivity of the world, um, with doing nothing but printing a piece of paper.
Mm.
And so obviously, if you could control that, if you could control money, and money is superordinate to laws, if you can control money, human nature says you will. Somebody will, right?
Yeah, that
And
makes sense.
and human nature says that you could go through 3,000 years of human history and see the same thing over and over and over again, repeating in the same thing. Because there, and this is where it starts to touch to Bitcoin, and where everything I'm talking about right now, I actually tried to disprove when I looked at Bitcoin. Because if there was something that was decentralized and secure, truly decentralized and secure, that for the first time in history, and there was always something before that through all of our history and all the history books that couldn't be decentralized and secure, then the error code in all of our history books would be filled with, and the winners write history books, would be filled with economics would look like a system that was always ended up being centralized because of that the power that it gains, and it just consolidates because there is only paths. There is no free, if there is no free market, right, without decentralization and security, and one path eventually leads to total control, then, and we never had something that could stop this, then you could see why people would be really confused about something new like Bitcoin that was so different than anything that was there before.
Mm.
And so you almost have to start there. Um, and I'm going to say, before I go deeper into Bitcoin, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but before I go deeper into Bitcoin, just, you know, remember, I tried to disprove what I'm saying. And
Right.
there's this thing in Bitcoin that the people that aren't trying to scam you in Bitcoin will say, don't trust, verify. And what that means, it's an open network. All of what I'm about to say, you can run your own node. I audit the entire Bitcoin technology every 10 minutes with a node that costs me nothing. And so I'm one of the nodes so all of the stuff that I'm about to say about the decentralization and how this works and everything else is completely open for anybody to learn. And then ask yourself this: if you lived in a system that gained its control by stealing from you, what would it say? And all of the media, all of the vagina, all of the government, and all of everything else, the bigger they got, gained more control by stealing from you and taking it, kind of not letting you see this fact that I'm talking about. What would it say about a system that gives it back?
What would it say about a system that gives
What
it?
it, what would it say about a protocol like Bitcoin, an open monetary
Mm,
network protocol that gives that power back to you? And you could see and then now you could see why it would be really confusing, and why you'd need to do you work with an open mind,
mm,
because the system you live in only remains solvent by debasing your currency. It has to lock you into that system, and it has to make you think there's another enemy within that system, right? And it has to take more of your freedoms away while it controls you. It has to, mathematically, it has to. Otherwise, the thing fails. And so, what would that system say, and the people within that system, whether they know it or not,
mm.
about a system that restores this balance to humanity, and gives the power back to you, to all people?
Well, I think people would, of course, would welcome a system that does that. It's the trust issue, I suppose, because we've all lived for generations with this one system, and then there's this promise of utopia with another system in which you can be your own banker, and as you say, with the technical side of looking after your own node and all of that, which is something which I have yet to really fully understand. But on the basis of that, I think people would love to have that system. My worry, and I guess, and that's why it's nice to have this conversation, is it's a digital medium, and digital anything has only been around for a very short space of time, whereas physical commodities have been around since the beginning, whether they be I've got a bigger rock than you or I can trade this for you, whereas the digital realm seems vulnerable in some respects, um, mainly because it's run on electricity, I suppose.
And by the way, that's a feature, not a bug. But we'll go into why. And just
Right.
as and it is going to sound just like I'm not paying 10, but we used horses for a long time for transportation until cars,
Mm.
and then horses weren't used as transportation very much anymore, right? So technology that we invent always creates something better that was there before, that gives more value, always wins over time. And what we talked about in the scarcity of the scarcity in the world today is an illusion from the system that's actually stealing your scarcity, because it's predicated on this concept: abundance and money. I create more monetary units, right? Creates scarcity everywhere because those monetary units chase scarce things, and that's what consolidates. Whereas you've had the opposite, scarcity in money. Bitcoin's denominated 21 million hard capped, right? And nobody can change the rules. Scarcity in money creates abundance because the natural free market attacks the highest margin things. Because why would it, like, I use this example all the time. Everybody has a calculator app where they can go to Google and they can use a calculator app for free. So is an entrepreneur going to go to create the next calculator app? No,
Right.
they're
No.
going to attack something that has high margin. It would be like an entrepreneur saying, "I'm going to give you an oxygen mask right now." It's ridiculous, because when things come to abundance, when you actually allow them to the process to flow to society in the form of lower prices, the things that are higher priced and higher margins get attacked. It's like swarming it because there's
Mm.
more value to create there. That's actually why there's no monopoly in a free market. Um, so so that concept is so hard to understand, because what we do is we measure a system from the system, right? We don't measure the new system, and we carry our baggage into something new from the old system. So we carry all of the past baggage into how the new system has to operate. And and in Bitcoin specifically here, it doesn't care what I'm saying. It is imposing. It doesn't care what a government says. It doesn't care if it's truly decentralized and secure, and we're going to go into that deeper.
Mm.
But if it's truly decentralized and secure, and it can't be co-opted by the system, no matter what media, no matter what government bans, no matter what happens, and it can't be, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Then 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 it is pricing everything else rather than, but most people are confused because they're pricing Bitcoin. They think it's volatile because they're pricing it from their currency. So I'll give you an example. This house I'm in right now was $1.4 million 4 years ago. And now it's 2.1 million measured in Canadian currency. In Bitcoin, it was 300 Bitcoin 4 years ago, and now it's 35 Bitcoin.
Oh,
4 years from now, this house is going to be 3.5 Bitcoin.
right. So it sounds. I mean, on the face of that, it sounds like you're losing money in
No, no, no.
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is repricing everything. So Bitcoin is going, you could say, I prefer to say, instead of Bitcoin going up, because if you're saying Bitcoin is going up, you're measuring from your currency. And the only reason it's going up is because the currency is being debased. If you're measuring the market, what a currency should measure, all other prices, the true and the free market is deflationary, and the only thing without counterparty risk to the rest of the market is Bitcoin, then in Bitcoin terms, all other prices will fall. Energy prices will fall. House prices will fall. Because the only reason why house prices rise so much is because if you put your money in the bank today, you lose money. So
Mm.
people store their wealth in houses to try. And so it's attracted, instead of a house being a utility like it was 50, 60, 70 years ago, a house is a store of value. It's created a monetary premium to try to stop the debasing of currencies. But
So
if you,
are
yeah,
you saying that if I'd already started on my Bitcoin journey and had accrued in the early days something like 35 Bitcoin, I could come along, buy your house, which would be a lot cheaper for me.
exactly.
And whereas if I was paying in fiat currency, I'd be there for some time handing those notes over to you.
More and more bank, more and more leverage into the existing system, making the existing system stronger as it's debasing on it, as it's consolidating. Whereas this is just telling you what the free market is. And every single person on the planet has a chance to essentially not pay back the debt that is already insolvent. And if you live in the existing system and you're paying back the debt, no matter what you're doing in there, you're actually locking in and making all of the bigger companies and bigger governments stronger against you. And every single person has a chance to learn about this, walk over to the other side into the free market and price the rest of the world. And they don't have to pay for any of the debt that came. They can just move their time over and move their energy over, and it's repricing everything. And I'd say the caveat that as long as it stays decentralized and secure, what I just said, the time, I can't tell you the exact date because most people are telling you because they're talking about prices and they're
Mm.
saying this is going to make so much money. And so when I hear that, I think you don't really understand Bitcoin because they're making how much money this means in fiat currency.
They're translating it across.
Right. They're
Right.
translate. It's like look at Bitcoin price. Just pull up a chart and look at Bitcoin price relative to Argentina or Turkey or Egypt, where you have these massive devaluations right now. It's setting massive all-time highs. The denominator is useless to use if in a depreciating currency, and every fiat currency is debasing. They're just at different rates, and Bitcoin doesn't care.
Right. Okay. I mean, a lot of this is people who have quite a lot of financial knowledge and stuff. My concern is, I suppose, is working out for the average everyday person who goes to work, who doesn't know a lot about finances, doesn't understand inflation or deflation, just knows, well, they understand it intrinsically in as much as all the prices go up, of course, and that they're having to work longer to buy less. So they get that. But I suppose it's and you mentioned this at the beginning about horses and cars and how we no longer use horses we don't go on the motorways riding horses because A, there's no space for them, but B, it would take forever to do it. And we'd have no economic advantage. And so new technologies come in and people are fearful of new technologies. That's just a psychological thing that people have. And I guess I put myself into that because how do you know it's secure and trustworthy when I know that the money that I'm earning from wherever is sitting in fiat currency, which is completely untrustworthy and losing money every single day. I know
Isn't
that, but I'm holding on to that for some stupid reason.
It's
I
crazy.
I
It's
know
crazy.
it
And
is crazy.
and by the way, most people that are terrible risk allocators, right? And from exactly what they measure the risk of a new, or they think they measure the risk of the new. They haven't done the deep dive. They trust somebody else on the risk of the new, typically, and they mismeasure the risk of the existing. And so, if you looked at these two systems today, it's not only the most asymmetric bet on the planet. It's not the only the thing that stops everything. The more money that's taken out of the existing system, more time putting in this, the faster the world transitions and restores the power to the people and government in
Mm,
service of the people. So it's so the more time people move to the new system, so every single person on this planet on an open network has the power to be able to shift their time. Most people don't because they're terrible risk allocators. They only assume the risk of the new and they don't know the risk of the existing. And what you just explored is the existing is where all the risk is. I can't
yes.
believe you have the safest thing right now on the planet. It's the only thing without counterparty risk to the rest of the system, which we know is inherently unstable and unsafe, and consolidating more and more of our individual rights and freedoms away from us. And the thing that solves that, most people are afraid of. It's crazy.
Yes. So when people are screaming cash is king and don't go to CBDCs, they're fooling themselves effectively to keep the currency, uh, the money, which I always get
Yeah.
confused on these terms, and people jump down and say, "Oh, that's the wrong thing." But are they fooling themselves because you're still within?
They're making it
Well,
stronger. Everything they do.
yeah,
So imagine farmers protests right now across Europe. You don't see them on the news because the news is trying to shut that out, but they're everywhere, everywhere.
yeah, we've just started
Yeah.
that in the UK.
Yeah. So what ends up happening? Block roads, everything else, economic contraction happens, and everything else, and then then something happens. They go home. Where does the money come to solve that problem? Print more
Mm,
money. They
yeah.
steal more money from you, whether it's in cash, whether it's in digital CBCC, no matter what. All of those things. People rise up, they go break windows, they go to war. Where does the money come from? That it comes from you. It
So
comes from it
are
comes
you
from
saying
stealing you from you.
right? Yeah. So are you saying then if farmers, for example, if they all said, right, okay, we're all just going to move on to a Bitcoin, or if there was another similar, very safe, exactly the same,
Yeah.
whatever it was, another platform for our fine, and that's how we're going to do it, and we're going to demand that everybody that we deal with, or you don't get any food, goes the same. They
It
could end this quite easy.
it, it, it would shift there so fast. If 20% of the population moved to it, then that means the remaining 80% has to be stolen from faster.
And then it would become
Right.
more
And then it would
obvious.
collapse. It would collapse. It would steal all of the power from the remaining, when it would turn to 60% and 50% and 40%, then
Yeah,
there's very few people giving the existing system any power, and it all is restored to you. And
yeah.
so we all have a role in that. And by the way, I think often through this, so the in technology, or how entrepreneurs come to, and how what we take for granted, we're all connected all over the world through this. If you have if you have a big city without broken money versus a big city with broken money, look at the economic performance or what the city looks like, right? And so what that means is we can work tied together, and we're the supercomputer, like us individually. We all
Mm,
impact each other. So I use this example quite often, but when when the printing press allowed us to download our brains and to increase our storage, and we didn't have to tell stories that lost fidelity,
right.
then
So we could
by
write books.
we wrote books, you could see what was there before and then have more ideas that created ideas on top of ideas. So it increased the level of compute in the world, which
Mm.
led to essentially more minds creating more ideas, which led to more abundance. And what and think of Faraday, right? So Faraday's lines, imagining that the world isn't like what it is, and that these energy and comes in waves and everything else. And then Maxwell seeing Faraday's lines, saying, creating the equations that run this right now, the perfect equations, the mathematical equations that run all of our telecommunications today. Those people wouldn't have been so. It was always there,
Mm.
right? People found it, created the insights to be able to put math towards it that runs all our communications, that we're doing this right now. Those people wouldn't have been found in the old model church and state. Probably Einstein wouldn't have been either. Probably other. So it opens up these minds, and we are kind of a fabric of all of these ideas getting better and better and better. So what would happen if you only had a couple of very small minds consolidated and telling the rest of the world what it looks like? Because today there's probably 400 million people that are actually connected to, and if you're at the top, you can do more things. If you're at the bottom, you're pretty much, it's
Stuffed.
monetary slavery.
Yeah.
It's disguised slavery through a monetary system. So there's 7.5 billion people unconnected from what we're talking about, because they're the slaves. Like if you didn't dig out cobalt out of the ground at $2 a day in Ghana, electric car wouldn't work.
Mm.
And so why the IMF goes in and keeps on devaluing their currency further is because it's part of the system. It has to work like this. Now open up those minds into a new network that is in service to everyone, and abundance comes to us faster.
So I understand broadly what you're saying, and I totally agree that we've got this system, and I'm part of it, and I don't want to be part of it because I can see my money devaluing as and my house and everything else. So I suppose from my point of view, and perhaps many others, it's a trust thing. How do we know this is A, it works, B, it's safe, it's secure, and it does what they say it will when it's all new, sexy, and
Yeah.
spoken about? And the other thing that I'd love to get addressed is that when I've had people on talking about Bitcoin, then there'll be those people who say, that system of Bitcoin is the wrong one. This is the correct one.
Yeah.
And it just reminded me of the old VHS versus Betamax tape wars, the
So
video wars.
So I'm going to try to give a framework that can help people start down here, so they can do their own work to understand and and kind of talk about what the other things would look like in that framework. Okay.
Okay.
Um, and and so, but if you can't grab onto everything, because we're going to get a little bit more technical into this, I put together on my website. It's called "Finding Signal in a Noisy World." If you just went to jeffbooth.ca, and Richard, if you wouldn't mind just putting it in the show notes so people can.
I will, yeah, of course.
And I've been told over and over that that's kind of one of the best pieces in this. It's because people go back to it over and over and over again because they can understand the physics and how this is designed in a way that keeps it decentralized and secure. But because it's hard to do, and this is why it's hard. This is why it's hard to get this. Protocols, technology comes along often, but protocols don't come along very often. And protocols come in layers. And on the first layer, it can only do one, it has to do one narrow thing, and it has to do it really well. And it ossifies it, and it gets harder and harder and harder. And then you can't see what's available on the next layer until the next layer is there. And then the next layer has to ossify. Because if any of the layers fail, then everything above it fails.
What
So
do you mean by ossify?
get harder. So the thing
Right.
that it does harder and harder and harder, and it can't do anything else, right? It has to ossify. So if you think about the technology stack that runs this right now that we're on, or your iPhone or anything else, if you think about how that rolled out, TCP/IP, which was the first layer, most people don't know that was developed by DARPA in the late 60s. And
Right.
it took till 1989, four other layers, or TCP/IP, then another layer, then another layer, then another layer. And the fourth layer was HTTP. And HTTP was the dawn of the World Wide Web. And remember, you're old enough to know, I'm old enough to know what the World Wide Web looked like in 1989 and what people said about it, that it would
Mm.
never be anything. It was 17 years later till this came out using the exact same protocol. So we think in terms of technology products instead of protocols. And so when there's a new protocol like that, it's really hard to understand.
Mm.
Number one, you have to think about Bitcoin as a protocol. What is it? What is that protocol? So it will be a new peer-to-peer internet bounded by energy. That's what's happening. So, but but think about it in terms of a protocol, and they ossify over time. So what did it do? What did it do, and how did it do it? There's something called a blockchain trilemma. A blockchain trilemma is you can solve three sides uh, of of what I'm going to say: decentralization, security, or scalability on layer one. You can only, but you have to choose two of three. So you can only choose two of three. So Bitcoin, in the trade-offs to be able to do that, Bitcoin chose decentralization and security. And you could prove what I'm saying right now, because every year it's more decentralized and secure. and all of the reasons for that difficulty algorithm, chasing mining, proof of work. And by the way, that's the best thing for the planet: abundant energy that's chasing free and abundant energy that creates a market incentive that decentralizes it everywhere. In fact, I was just in Africa to visit a village that only has electricity now because of Bitcoin mining. So we can go into that deeper, but it's chasing, and so that keeps it decentralized and secure. And then the nodes, and one of the reasons I said a node, I can audit the entire blockchain, entire history of it every 10 minutes with very little compute resources. So tons of people hold it honest. Hundreds of thousands of people hold it honest because they can run nodes. If you increased the block size, or if you did something else, if you then the compute power to be able to audit the nodes means only very few people can do it because it costs so much. You'd have to put it in an Amazon Web Service, and when that happens, you break the decentralization. So there's a whole bunch of checks and balances that it
But
created.
what would happen if it was broken like that?
So Bitcoin can't be, because for me, that node, I also enforce the rules. It's open source. So my node has to agree to a change that changes the rules. And so now we're going to get into game theory and all the other coins on what ends up happening, right? So that you can see this. So decentralization and security is paramount, but it comes, at least on the first layer, at a trade-off. And the trade-off was scalability. So the trade-off was you couldn't do anything else on it. You couldn't do smart contracts on it. You couldn't scale it. It would only do 5 to 7 transactions a second on the first layer. And so what would the world look like if if all you did is held this thing and you got richer and richer and richer and you did nothing? And wouldn't it create a market for a whole bunch of people that say, I have a better thing? My
Right.
thing is better. My technology is better. That's old tech. So now we have to dig into how could it be better, right? And with an open mind, how could it
Mm.
be better, and what would it look like? Because they have to make a trade off to do it, right? And so let's say the trade off is I make my blocks bigger, Bitcoin Cash or something else, and it's open source code. I can just cut it over tomorrow. I can keep a whole bunch of the benefit because I can create another coin and I can sell to people that my thing is better than the old thing. But what are the trade-offs? So I make it scalable, but I have to trade off I have to centralize it over time. And if I centralize it over time, why would you use a blockchain? Because a database is just much more efficient. So now you're centralizing something that is in a very eventually in very few people's control. I understand why the people who control it want to sell it, right? Because they make a whole bunch of money on selling it to
Mm.
you. But why would you use, what economic activity could ever actually, is Amazon going to move all their products to a higher cost database?
No.
So the market would never work. There's no economic incentive for that would ever work. What about the other side? What if you sacrificed, like you hear all the hacks and people are scared of all the stuff that ends up happening. And the hacks are driven because they're not secure. They've traded
Mm.
off decentralization and they traded off security. And so there is no possible way in this design space to not make those trade-offs. So now you just say, how about a new Bitcoin? So the longest chain in every 10 minutes for the last 14 years keeps on keeps on so happening. And all it does is this one thing: decentralization and security. And you could measure by amount of compute, the decentralization of the network, and how you can see how it's like exponentially more decentralized and secure today. So now try to compete with that. So you're going to create another decentralized secure thing that has less compute and less security with the same utility. So who would use that, right?
Right.
And so I would like people to do their own work on this. They could start with my article, but what you can see from the trade-offs is that's what it does really well. That's what Bitcoin does really well. And now where we're investing as a fund, because it's not just that, because most people are what's coming on top of it. Now there's a transport layer on top of it. It's called Lightning. And Lightning means I could beam you money right now, and it would cost me about half a penny. And you could put that into it would come over in Bitcoin, that layer, and Bitcoin, it come immediately on and it would aggregate all these payments. And then every 10 minutes, it comes back down to the decentralized. So it's built in layers. And so it does sacrifice, and Lightning sacrifices some centralization, right, in the second layer. But then every 10 minutes, it comes down to the first layer. Lightning growth has moved 22,000% in the last 2 years, and you don't know about it, right? And so
Hmm.
what that means, and I've been all over the world, and I pay people all over the world. It's my primary currency now, um, and I pay people all over the world in this, and nobody can stop me. And so there's a peer-to-peer economy growing, and the businesses that are taking aren't paying 2.5% to Visa or MasterCard and bank fees and all of this money that's losing money. They're increasing their value, and they're offering better value to their customers. And we wouldn't see it in the West as much because our currencies aren't devaluing as fast as other currencies. But take this, and that's what ends up happening in technology. It's a bottom up disruption. Take this to where it matters, and you're seeing it explode.
So is it that people will switch to this? I mean, you've spoken very eloquently and about the technical side of things, and a lot of people may completely understand that, and a lot of people may go, "Oh, hang on, this I don't quite get the layers, nodes, and all of
Yeah.
this, and blockchain." And you obviously appreciate all of that. But if you're in an economy in which it's crashing down, or the inflation is going up rapidly, as you said, in other parts of the world, is it really down to panic? I mean, just human panic of going, crikey, we've got to get our money out of that system. Where do we go? We've got to do something, otherwise we lose everything. We'll shove it in Bitcoin and hope.
In some cases, yes, but I would say as this, and this is going to happen to many of the people listening to this podcast. Some people are going to be objecting to it because they don't want to believe it, so they won't do the work. Some people will do the work, and they'll start to gain an insight, and then they'll gain more, and then they'll gain more. And as they start to go deeper down this, they'll realize everything I'm saying right now is true, and it's hard to comprehend. But as they shift more of their time into an honest network, the world becomes more honest. Because you just simply ask yourself, if you live on a base layer of theft,
Hmm.
what would the emergent qualities of behavior look like on the base layer of theft? And unfortunately, most people are living all of their time in a base layer of theft, and they know it.
Yes.
But ask the opposite question: what would emergent behavior of the world look like on a base layer of truth? And and then where do you want to spend your time, right? Because how do
Right.
you how do you how do you complain about other people when you yourself are spending most of your time in a base layer of theft, making it stronger? These are hard concepts, but
Well, absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
most people probably have no idea they're. I mean, they may vaguely know they're in this base layer of theft. They have no idea what a base layer of being honest is actually like.
we can't because we've never lived in that system.
Right.
And our books
So it's a
don't
huge leap of faith.
huge, and that's why you have to do the work to understand, is this true? And if there's so when I finished writing the book, I actually explored other cryptocurrencies, what that could look like. I even in my book, I only have a paragraph on Bitcoin. So it wasn't a Bitcoin book. And even though I had started buying Bitcoin before, but again, I got to this from trying to disprove what I was saying.
Hmm.
And I had assigned a 5% probability that Bitcoin would fail at that time. It would get centralized, it'd get captured, too much government control, everything else. And 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 then through going through work, I realized I just kept on assigning my probabilities of failure down as I did more work. So it wasn't a 5% probability of failure. It was my interpretation of what it was. that
Right.
was, and so, and I suspect the same thing will happen to many people that are listening to this. That suspect that'll happen to you
Mm.
as you're going through this. And just like I said, we all touch people positively or negatively, and and as you understand this more and understand that change, that change, you're going to just touch more people, and through that change, that's what the world looks like, and that's what the world will look like
Yes.
if there's a base layer of truth that's imposing that discipline.
Do we have time to do this? I mean, I'm just thinking back to the horses and cars when technology moves over from typewriters to word processors. It takes time for people to adjust and understand and have faith and confidence in the new system. And, at first with the cars, there were those mechanics who understood that cars broke down, they could fix them, they knew how to do it. You had to carry your spanners with you, otherwise, you'd be stuffed. And now cars are pretty good. You very rarely break down unless your car's really old or what have you, and if you have it, etc. So, do we have time for people to adjust before there is this potential panic that is likely to happen, because we keep getting told about the financial crash and then we go, oh my God, I've got some money, I want to protect it, I don't want to go down the government's route of program money.
Okay, so if you looked in Argentina or Venezuela today with hyperinflation, most people stay in the system.
Do they?
And or they try to get US dollars and they stay in this the system, but most people stay in the system, and then it resets and it goes for a transition period before it resets again, and they get rug pulled over and over and over again, and they get more and more mad, and they yell at more and more people in the system. And so if that happens all over the world today, then my suspicion it's going to keep happening,
Mm.
and most people will stay stuck. Most of your listeners will object to what we're saying and stay stuck and not do the work to be able to do this. But today you have a choice. And today by doing the work, you can take your time out of the system and apply it to the new on a system. If you believe, if you've done the work like I do, but so um, and you've done your work and you think that's true, right? So I'm not saying trust me.
Mm.
You
Mm.
have the choice. So the world doesn't change in it. Everybody's waiting for the crash, and you can sell lots of media by it's going to do this, it's going to do this, and predict this. That's not how the world works. It's transitions slowly. If you were an executive at Amazon or an executive at Sears, 95 to 2010, Sears was the biggest department store before that. Um, then you were viewing two different worlds. One was growing, everything was getting better, one was collapsing. It didn't change the world, it just changed your view of it and and so what I'm suggesting is every single person on the planet has an ability to change their view of the world in Bitcoin. And not everyone will.
You mentioned that there's a limited number of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a very obvious question for you, but for a lot of people, they might kind of see where I'm coming from. Is there enough to go round?
So there's 21 million Bitcoin. So there's always enough money to go around because prices fall to to match that. It's a useless art to say. Think about this simply, right?
Hmm.
If you and me, two other, let's say three other people had, I had 2 units of monetary value, you had four, somebody else had one, somebody. So that's a distribution created on what value we created to society. And then one day there was this magical person that created an additional 100 monetary units when there were only 10.
Hmm.
Your four didn't go to 40. You had your pocket picked, but you wouldn't know it because you
Right.
didn't know, right? And so what's happening in this system, it's just hard capped, and prices fall to against that hard cap forever. But even in Bitcoin, so it's 21 million Bitcoin, but those Bitcoin are divisible by 100 million each. And And because of Lightning Network now, kind of that transaction layer on top, you have unlimited velocity and money. Like I could beam you money right now. It would be and you could beam it around the world and it could come back to me in 10 minutes. It could go to do 40 hops within 10 minutes without touching a bank or all of the people in the bank and all the fees that everyone extracts and that. It just hops around. So you don't need more money and creating more scarcity, more units
Right.
of currency, creating more scarcity. It flows to society.
How about if you want to borrow money,
So, so,
mortgages and things like that?
so I would be very careful. And in fact, this is tied into what ends up happening, and it will continue to happen and scaring people. FTX and a whole bunch of these blowups are effectively trying to play a game with with an asset that doesn't have counterparty risk. And if they can get you to hold your Bitcoin that you should hold yourself in a self-custodial wallet with them, they lever it and they create paper Bitcoin. But when what ends up happening is when people come back to try to get the Bitcoin, it's not all there and these things fail. And there's going to be many, many financial institutions that are going to spectacularly fail in the future by trying to play games with an honest system. This is just an honest system, and if it stays decentralized and secure, if you hold your keys in your head, and nobody can take them from you, and more people hold their keys in their head, then there is nothing the existing system can do. And if they leverage it, if they play cheating games like Wall Street or like the system looks like today, they get it liquidated. Nobody comes to save you. And so
Right.
that's what's happening over and over and over again. And it's scaring more people away from Bitcoin because they're trusting their Bitcoin with somebody else because they're used to trusting their stuff with a bank. And so the decentralization and security, and you hold your own keys to this, and how secure that is critical in nature to what this looks like. It is the only thing without counterparty risk to the system. Your second question, what about debt? In this new system, the existing system has $400 trillion of insolvent debt. It's already insolvent. Like just you being in it is saying, I'm going to pay for insolvent debt for the rest of my life. My entire working time is going to spend and increasing in insolvent debt, paying to somebody else that is extracting my wealth. That's what it's doing. In this new system, debt is going to be way smaller because if prices fall, then if prices continue to fall, then debt gets more expensive,
Right. Yes.
right? Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
And it becomes a lot less appealing.
exactly, but I don't need as much debt because my house fell by 10 times in the last 4 years, and it's going to fall another 10 times in the next 4 years when measured in Bitcoin. So the amount of debt needed in society collapses because things are in the free market. They fall to the marginal cost of production.
So can you tell me about these? The argument I've had from people, or the warnings, let's say, that people have said, "Oh, don't trust Bitcoin," is because of these two different systems, BSV and BTC, which have been
So
thrown at me, and
so
I would
yeah,
not know which one, which one to look at or follow.
so both of those, if you just look at Bitcoin, and Bitcoin Core is the main one, those are created by exactly that was called the block size wars. And what that was some people that wanted bigger blocks and control of this, but centralized control, where they could make a whole bunch of money promoting something that wasn't Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, when that change that happened in 2017, because the mining, all of the compute, all the decentralized stayed on the main chain, and the other one with less compute, less resources, and everything else got smaller and smaller and smaller. They started at the same price because if you owned Bitcoin at that time on the split, you got a share in both.
Right.
And the share in the one that was kind of being promoted would make the people that were promoting it richer and richer
Oh, I
at
see.
at
Yes.
your expense. So they would have a huge amount of marketing to confuse people about what was happening. And that's
Yes.
why I say if you wanted to do all of this work and just see what's the longest chain, what has the most compute, what has the most decentralization and secure, you can easily see it. It's what I just explained. It's just Bitcoin and all of the other nonsense. If you just go back to that, that's why I say read that article, and you need to read the article over and over and over again because there's just so much noise in this,
Right.
because there's so much promotion and nonsense. And I will actually just want to point that out. If you're following me on any social media, make sure you go to my website first and make sure that it is me, because there's just too many scammers in this in this that I will never ask for money. I will never ask for your money. Don't Anybody who asks you for money is not somebody who you want to trust into this space.
Yeah, I mean, just on YouTube alone, I get scammers pretending to be me
Yeah,
saying, "Oh, WhatsApp me, make a donation here or
yeah.
whatever." So I know exactly what you mean. So to just can you clarify? Bitcoin is Bitcoin, and whether it's BSV or BST, it's still Bitcoin. It's
No,
just a
no.
different
BSV is
node.
a totally different BSV and Bitcoin Cash. They're totally different. They're
They're
trying to
just names.
they're trying to copy the name to be able to confuse people, to be
So
able to
the
promote their thing.
right. So if you're looking for pure Bitcoin as you've been describing, it would just be Bitcoin,
Only
nothing
Bitcoin,
else.
only Bitcoin, and every other. This is going to be a stretch for some people because they understand crypto or every other crypto, whether they know it or not. I believe every other, in my opinion, every other cryptocurrency goes to zero.
Right.
Every other one, because this is a protocol. It's not a cryptocurrency. It's a protocol design. And the longest, most honest, decentralized, and secure chain wins over time. And then on top of that layer, you don't need other tokens. You don't need other coins. It's ubiquitous. It works in layers. And you add different functionality with different trade-offs to scale in layers. And all of the other coins can't serve that purpose.
And we're coming up to the end of my sort of usual hour allotted time. It's been really interesting. But before we go, I wanted to ask, is it likely that there would be another product as similar and as honest as the product you've just described as Bitcoin
I
that
don't.
might?
I honestly don't think so. I used to think potentially I had to open up. I don't think it's possible anymore. You could say, is this an invention or a discovery? But once discovered, and how much security and how much decentralization, how much mining and compute is holding this network, and how many nodes are keeping it honest, I I can't see this being discovered again,
Right.
right? Because what would the new decentralized security offer that this one wouldn't,
So
right?
it's like
To be able to
rediscovering another gravity or something.
exactly, because you'd have to ask what utility would it gain? What that people would move from something that is moving so fast exponentially that already does this, and then the technology, kind of the protocol layers that are coming on top of that, adding different value. I just don't see, because if you created something decentralized and secure again, then and governments knew that you could, they would co-opt it immediately,
Right.
right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think that's been really, really interesting. You put it over in a very intelligent way. Some bits may have gone over my head and others, but as you say, go to jeffbooth.ca
Yeah, .ca. Yeah.
to read the article and understand it, and really not to fear what it could be, and just think about whether. I mean, this is the thing that I've been more worried about than anything is staying in the old system, trusting it or not trusting it, just knowing that it's a waste of space and not.
I'm a cog in that plan.
Yeah.
That's
And
yeah.
no, that's a very good point. And I guess like the horses and the cars, the horses are dying.
Yeah.
Jeff, thank you so much for taking us through this. I appreciate your time, and I'm sure a lot of people will go and check that out. And I guess there's no harm in trying it with a small amount and an experiment.
That's where I would start. I would start, don't don't just go and throw all your money here. Start and learn why, and learn and
Just
learn.
before I
Yeah.
actually on that note, are banks worried that people will transfer their,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yes. So you there's a whole bunch of European Union laws and UK laws that are going to make this harder and harder to. It can't be stopped, but again, the existing system can only survive if it steals an increasing amount of money from you, and not just the amount it's stealing now, an increasing amount, and then you'll try to rise up against that, so it has to take away your individual rights and freedoms as well. In fact, a lot of the what you call chaos or tail events that feel like they're everywhere today,
Hmm.
they're designed to keep you fearful in the system, and you're all your energy is getting sucked into that is keeping you in the system. So yes, it is. You would want to move some. You want to understand how to self secure this in a cold storage wallet, and to really self custody. You want to start moving money outside of the system into this, ideally as soon as possible.
Jeff, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. It's been fascinating insight into something which is a little bit mind boggling to, I think, a lot of people, but you've made it hugely easier to comprehend, and I appreciate that.
Thanks, Richard. It
That
was great.
No, thank you. There we are, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you got something out of that. Do check out the website. The link will be in the description, of course. I will be back with more monologues and other wonderful guests. In the meantime, from Jeff and I, thank you for watching. Till next time, goodbye.